Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for your interest in this important question. This event is sponsored by CARE, Citizens Alliance for Responsible Energy. Founding members are Dave Kitchell, Jim Brew, me, Mercedes Brew. Julie Kitchell is also a founding member, but she was unable to join us tonight. We would like to thank our anonymous donor who made it possible to rent this hall and all the other expenses we have had, which brings us to the tip jar, which was outside the door when you came in. If you can help us out, we would appreciate it. Speaking for CARE, we hope that you will see that we are not the first community to face these kinds of questions. We think we can learn from what other communities have experienced. You may have noticed that we do not have anyone from the pro-incineration side on our panel. We have, however, printed 2 recent letters from the pro-incineration side, and those are available on the table outside the door where you came in. We also have some fact sheets on that table. We intend to finish in 2 hours. The first hour, we will hear from our experts. Please hold your questions for the second hour. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. This is Mike Ewall from Philadelphia, and next to him is Brad Angel from California, and finally Morton Marcus, and that will be the order what they will speak in. Thank you. Morton needs his microphone turned on.
All the time, because I've got something
all the
to
time.
Say. Right.
Thank you.
Actually, Bradley was going to go first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Bradley's going to go first.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Again, my name is Bradley Angel, and it's really an honor to be in your community, and I really want to thank folks for the invitation to come and share the information that we have about this technology and this proposal. And I also appreciate the wonderful hospitality I've had since I've arrived here. I am the executive director of a small nonprofit in California called Green Action. And we are not your typical environmental group. We are an organization that was founded in late 1997 by people just like yourselves, not professional activists, not liberals or conservatives, Republicans or Democrats, by just regular folks living in communities that ended up being threatened by pollution and were concerned about their health and the health of their families and the well-being of the communities. And that's what motivates our work. I've been doing this type of work with communities like yours for 26 years now. I've lost track. I've worked in several hundred communities, from big urban centers to small rural communities to farming communities to Native American communities, every shape, color, and size. And one of my areas that I've focused on in all these years, all of them related to health and pollution, has been the issue of waste disposal and also energy. And I want to say up front, I am not a chemist, and I'm not a scientist, but I can read, and I can research, and I know how to ask some good questions so we can get the facts. And I think for this issue that's before you, and I'm so thrilled there's so many people here tonight to gather more information, and certainly there's an opportunity to ask questions, because one of the things I've learned before I came here, and especially since I've been here, including meeting with some of your city officials earlier today, is that a lot of the facts, not public relations, but a lot of the facts have not been shared with you, the residents of this community. So that's what I hope to add to the information, because in our democracy, I believe that we all, and in your community, you need to have all the facts so that you can make an informed decision. So I'm going to give you a little context, and then we're going to get specifically into what Pyrolyzer has told you, and very importantly, what they have not told you. First of all, for many years, as you know, what happens with garbage? It's dumped, it's burned in incinerators. There's problems with all of that. And that's why a lot of folks around the country, from communities to organizations to government, works on how do we reduce the amount of garbage. You know, recycling, it's called zero waste. But new technologies have really come out in the last decade. Some of them have been around for a while, though, and they're not names most normal folks have heard of. I never heard of them until we started seeing some of these proposals that just sounded so amazing, they really warranted being checked out. Things like pyrolysis, like is being proposed here, which is gasification. Pyrolysis is a type of gasification. Also something called plasma arc. And typical industry claims, not all of these are made by pyrolyzer, a lot of them are, things like, we have no pollution, there's no air pollution, it's proven to be safe, we can generate all this electricity. Some companies even say there's no stacks. It's a big one, which you hear here and we see on the signs outside. It's not incineration, supposedly. And I'm going to talk about that. One thing I want to share is that there are key differences between what's being proposed here by pyrolyzer and stated by their supporters and traditional incinerators. And we want to acknowledge that. Traditional incinerators directly burn the waste. You just throw it in, direct contact with the flame. And it's true, that is not what is being proposed here. The pyrolysis and gasification, however, what they do is they would heat the garbage first. And then what they don't like to talk about is they combust, and what we would say incinerate, burn the gases that are created. But those are important differences. Similarities, as I just briefly mentioned, a combustion process. Similarities are, despite the denials, toxic emissions. We believe dioxin, which is one of the most deadliest and toxic chemicals known to science, we believe would be emitted from this, and we'll talk about it in a few minutes. One of the similarities is, if this operates just like a traditional incinerator, most days of the year you would have no idea what's coming out of the stacks because they don't monitor for any of the air toxics that would come out virtually 99% of the days of the year. There's just been a few of these in the country. In fact, there has been zero commercial facilities treating garbage as the feedstock using pyrolysis in a business. There's been none. There's been 2 commercial gasification plants in the United States. Both were miserable failures, and very quickly. One was up in Richland, Washington, and it was using another gasification technology called plasma arc. It had chronic operational problems. They treated mixed hazardous and radioactive waste. The equipment didn't work. They filed for bankruptcy. The workers lost their jobs, which was terrible. And workers, of course, were very upset because they had these grand hopes for good jobs. The facility was closed. And very importantly, because the equipment didn't work and the waste kept coming when it wasn't working, there were stockpiles that were left untreated and abandoned of mixed radioactive and hazardous waste. And what do you know? The same thing happened in Hawaii, where a company called Hawaii Medical Vitrification, which operated only for a few years, dealt with medical waste, they got busted by the state of Hawaii because, again, the equipment, gasification, broke down, and the waste kept coming, and they stockpiled it, and it was permanently shut down in 2007. But now let's talk about pyrolysis. In California, in Southern California, in Riverside County, there was a company called IES, and they just dropped pyrolysis equipment in a little town called Romoland. Despite trying for years, they never could get their permits. They had repeated problems with their emissions and equipment. And our organization actually caught them moving with another company called Green Gas. They actually did move the equipment to a tiny Indian reservation where nobody lives and tried to operate, and we alerted the federal government, and the company was made to submit applications which have been rejected so far because they're not providing the information needed. And I show this slide because one of the things you'll hear is the company and certain officials around here claim dioxin, which can cause cancer, birth defects, hormonal problems, endocrine disruption, and a host of reproductive ill health effects. There couldn't be no dioxin. You've read it in the paper probably. This, again, this isn't, we have to say it's not pyrolyzer, but it is a plant that use pyrolysis, and you'll see from this chart, this is information from a government agency in California, and it shows that they detected a wide range of hazardous air pollutants from the pyrolysis equipment, including substantial amounts of dioxin. So I just wanted to point that out. One of the last things I want to say before we get specifically into this project is there was very recently a pyrolysis proposal in Wisconsin. And it was a company that first tried on the Oneida Reservation and then moved to Green Bay when tribal members objected. And in Green Bay, they got their permit, but people challenged it and the city council rescinded it because there were knowingly false claims made. The company appealed, the courts upheld the taking away the permit. There is no such facility. And then tribal members rejected it as well. And that's very recent. But let's talk about pyrolyzer. This is the front page of their proposal. The city, as most of you or all of you know, put out a request for a proposal for a contract. And pyrolyzer came back with this document, several dozen pages. And I've reviewed it extensively, and I also talked to some of your city officials about it over lunch today. And you'll see it says 300 megawatts waste-to-energy facility. This is a picture of their modular equipment, so you can see what they're talking about. But let's talk about what they claim. To get into these negotiations they've been doing with the city, which I understand has cost $1.5 million apparently of your tax dollars, for some high-paid consultants who I think should be doing a better job, pyrolyzer claimed they could process 6,000 tons a day of garbage. But I checked out Pyrolyzer's website, and the largest unit they have on there is 150 tons a day. So this would be, if it was their original proposal, 40 times larger than anything they even claimed they could do, which has never been done, by the way, even the smaller version. 40 times larger. Raised some concerns. Sounded pretty great. But what, you have 40 of these units here? This would be the first commercial municipal solid waste pyrolysis plant in the country. There's no such facility in the world, even anywhere close to this size, that they've tried to pitch to all of you. And it would be, based on our research and our colleagues, one of the largest municipal solid waste facilities using combustion on the planet we all live in. So pretty ambitious proposal. But the ambitious proposal doesn't end there. And this should really alarm you. To get in the door, to get considered so favorably, they claimed they could generate 300 megawatts of electricity. I was pretty shocked because that's countless times bigger than any similar plant in the world. I read with interest that they've now reduced it, now that they're in contract discussions, mysteriously it's reduced to 150 megawatts. Curious how that happened. Of course, they've never generated anything of the sort. In fact, pyrolyzers never apparently generated a megawatt. But pyrolyzer then also talks about these two facilities. They talk in their proposal. And I don't know how many of you folks have read it. I encourage you to. But I'm referring directly to their proposal. I'm not making this up. It's not our spin. This is their claims. Number one, they cite a reference facility in Eilenberg, Germany. So here they claim they could do 6,000 tons a day of garbage. Their reference facility, their model, was built for 37 tons a day instead of 6,000 tons a day. 162 times bigger is what they're proposing here than even their model plant, which didn't do what they said they would do, has done. We found out, and reading just Pyrolyzer's own information, that this reference plant only processed 2,500 tons in an entire year compared to 6,000 tons a day that they claim they could do here. How is it that this model plant generated less than a half in a year, processed less than a half in an entire year than they're telling you they could do in a day here? More ominously is the longest continuous run of that facility in Germany was 15 days, and the contract was canceled due to financial reasons. So folks think this is going to be some magic bullet for jobs and economic development. I think the facts need to be looked at a little closer. There was also the inventor, according to Pyrolyzer, had a pilot plant Pyrolyzer here says 6,000 tons a day. You know how big the pilot plant is? 4 tons a day. 1,500 times smaller. Some reference plant. They didn't disclose the name of the facility or its location, and it only operated about 7.5 days per year average. One of the most alarming things that I need to tell you that to your city officials who are promoting this, although they said they would really consider this information, they were pretty alarmed when I pointed this out today. On page 7 of Pyrolyzer's proposal, they say one of the benefits is that they can recycle chlorinated plastics, plastics with chlorine in it, and tires, and I quote, without air pollution and also without incineration. But let's focus on the without air pollution. As I stand here before you, I will say, not only do I say that that claim is false, but their own proposal contradicts it. But it's right there on top of page 7 where it says advantages of their pyrolyzer technology. First thing they say, without air pollution. In fact, on page 17, they admit there are air emissions, including hazardous air pollutants. But it really would trouble me if it was my community and a company comes in and says, trust us, we're great, we can do 6,000 tons per day, 1,500 times bigger than this pilot plant they mentioned, which they don't tell you where it is, countless times more energy than ever been created, and then makes the claim that there's no air pollution, when that's pretty impossible. Adding to the concern is that despite these 2 reference plants apparently existing, although I guess one closed, and them assuring you it's absolutely safe, it's a tremendous concern to me, and I would hope to you, that they do not give any emissions data at all. None. So in their proposal to the city, there is a grand total of 0 emissions data from these plants that they cite, or from any other plant using this technology on the planet. None. They do have a chart that says air emissions requirements at the facility in Germany that closed due to financial problems, but those are just the requirements that the German government put. Nothing about emissions data. Why not? Where is this data? Didn't the companies know it was coming out of their stacks? Maybe they did, and they didn't want to divulge it, or maybe they didn't, which is also a problem, but it should be a tremendous concern that the city is considering moving forward with a contract for a facility and for a company that somehow cites these facilities, but there's no information about what comes out. I think that's a really big problem and makes claims that simply are not in line with reality. I also need to point out the reference plant that they treat a different type of waste, so it's not really comparable anyhow. I noted that they didn't talk about the size of their stacks or how many. Excuse me. Excuse me. Now, very quickly, I want to address the claim that this is not incineration. But interesting, because in the letter to editor from their project manager on April 24th, you know what they say? Pyrolyzer gases are burned in the combustion turbines. So burning and combustion is not incineration. I don't know what is. But now let's look at the law. And I'll just touch on it very quickly, that the United States Environmental Protection Agency defines the burning of gases from pyrolysis as incineration, as municipal waste combustor, and those laws are applicable here. So that is also information you need to know. So in summarizing, I would say that I know all of you care about the healthier families, you care about the healthier kids. We do need energy. We also need ways to deal with the garbage crisis, no doubt. But let's not make mistakes. And there's no easy answers and there's no perfect solutions. But if it was in my community, and I'm not here to tell you what to do, I was asked to share our observations and research on these claims and what we've seen in other communities, is that truth is really important when it comes to stuff that goes into your air. Because you breathe it and your kids breathe it, and in a community that has an important agricultural economy, I'd say that's doubly important because do you want hazardous air pollutants that are not being tested 363 or 364 days a year, landing on the food that you eat and that you sell for your economic prosperity? I think that's not. When cities and counties around the country, you're not the only one who's considered these things. And I do not blame the city officials for considering it. I don't at all. But we encourage them and urge them to look closer at these claims. It's a little alarming after all these months that two of the city officials had no idea what page 7 of the pyrolyzer proposal said, claiming that there would be no air pollution. I mean, it's pretty troubling, to put it mildly. And so look at these facts, read their proposal, use the knowledge and the brains you all have, and I appreciate you all being here to really find out more information about it. But I think when you look at it, you're going to find out it's not the solution for jobs, and everybody in this room knows that the jobs, including of the men and women who are outside, are really important, and we understand that. But this isn't the solution. If the reference facility cited by Pyrolyzer went out of business and their contract was canceled due to financial problems, I don't think those jobs would last real long anyhow. So when so much is on the line, when the whole nature of your town could be changed. In fact, I want to say one other thing, that I gave 2 examples at the beginning of gasification plants that were getting shipments of waste. And when you sign a contract like Pyrolyzer claims, and I'm not aware, and I understand they don't have any contracts, but they claim they can get waste by rail coming in from Chicago and other places. What happens when it's coming into your town every day by rail? And what would happen if the equipment breaks down? Well, one of the city council members today said, well, they'll just turn around and send it back. Well, unfortunately, that's not what happens. What happened in Richland, Washington, and what happened in Oahu, it piled up, and it piled up, and it piled up. And what happens if Pyrolyzer goes out of business? When their plant, countless times bigger than anything that's ever happened using that technology on this planet Earth, if it doesn't work, you're going to be left with stinking mountains of garbage. And that's, I think, the reality. And it's going to be a problem to deal with. But I would just urge you, mostly from not just an economic perspective, but from a health perspective, think about, do you want a facility from a company that's made some claims that sound great, but don't necessarily fit in with reality, and they've left out a lot of information. And I urge you to look at, like the people in Anderson, Indiana, also looked at a pyrolyzation plant and rejected it once the facts became clear. So again, thank you so much for your time, for taking time out of your busy lives to come here. And again, we'll have questions and hopefully some answers for you in a little while. So thanks again.